Hey, hey, hey! First, I want to say thank you for sticking with me through Harry Potter. And if you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, do what you want, just be kind. Today is book 4, The Goblet of Fire. And can I please point out the size? Here's book 4. Here is book 3. Can you believe that jump in size? I would love to write so well that, because by this point, yes, Harry Potter is YA, and of course it is fantasy, and fantasy sci-fi is given much more leeway in terms of size because they have so much world building to do, but hi. Sorry, that wasn't supposed to happen. But holy cow! That's huge! That's huge! I mean, huge! Huge, okay? This is not a book that was like shrunk down and therefore has a lot of girth. This is a big book. But that kind of goes into why I think it is so great. But before I actually get into the detail, let me give you the brief synopsis. Starts off with Harry Potter ready for another fabulous year at Hogwarts, but not before he goes to the Quidditch World Cup with the Weasleys. Everything is all fun and games until the Death Eaters, who are Voldemort supporters, show up, wreak havoc, and then flee at the sight of the dark mark in the sky. And wouldn't you know it, Harry and his friends just happen to be located directly under the dark mark. And Harry is missing a wand, and the wand that they find to have cast the dark mark just happens to be his. Suspicion is cast, and of course he's innocent, so he heads off to Hogwarts, where there's even more excitement, and that would be the Tri-Wizard Tournament. And this means that 2 other magical schools show up at Hogwarts, and one person from each school is then chosen to be a champion to compete for the title of something. Don't really feel like remembering it right now. But that leads me into 2 questions. I know generally I have been trying to get the summaries out of the way, but if I don't, I'm going to forget because I didn't write these down. My first is, everybody gets to school. Dumbledore tells them about this tournament, and then he says, but there's an age restriction. I'm gonna draw an age line. So a number of students, including the Weasley twins, are trying to figure out ways to get their names in the Goblet of Fire despite being underage. None of it works, and then Harry is chosen. If you're keeping count, there are 3 schools, ergo there should be 3 champions. Harry ends up being the 4th champion, and it is pointed out, well, Harry, did you have an older student put your name in the cup? Did nobody else think about that? If it's that easy, why didn't the Weasley twins have somebody older than them put their name in the cup rather than spouting beards? Or, after Harry is announced, and then the heads of other houses are furious, and that would include Madame Maxime from Beauxbaton, or Beauxbaton, and then Professor Karkaroff from Durmstrang. So then, yes, Karkaroff is like, well, I'm going to take my champion, and we're going to leave. And then Professor Moody, who's the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, is like, no, you're not. Your champion has to compete. He's magically bound. How are they magically bound? Can they not leave the school grounds? What is it about having their name come out of the Goblet of Fire means that they have to compete? Never explained, something that has always bothered me. As well as the question about why didn't somebody else have an older student put their name in the Goblet of Fire if it was that easy? I don't know. Anyways, so now Harry, vastly underqualified, is thrust into the arena. He, with help, is able to tackle the tasks, and by the end of the book, or, by the 3rd task, he is tied for the lead with Cedric Diggory, who is the other Hogwarts champion. They go through the maze. Both he and Diggory touch the Goblet of Fire at the same time. It transports them to a graveyard in which Voldemort kills Cedric and then uses Harry to regain his corporeal form. The intention was also to kill Harry. It does not work out. Harry is able to return to Hogwarts with the help of the shade forms of some of Voldemort's final victims, which include Cedric and Harry's parents. And then, you know, word gets out that Voldemort's back. Nobody believes him. We find out that Alistair Moody was not Alistair Moody, but it was actually a Darth Eater. That's a mix between Darth Vader and a Death Eater. Excuse me. And it was a Death Eater in disguise, and then, oh, there we go, the end of the book, Harry goes home. Now we're gonna get to why I think this is such a fantastic book. I have already pointed out its size, and I really think that we could not have had this book at any shorter length. And that's because there are so many subplots, and they all create this perfect storm of diversion, of depth. There's so much foreshadowing within this book, within the series. Like, this book, Goblet of Fire, sets up so much in the entire series, and I think it is fantastic. First, and what's most obvious and important, is that Voldemort gets his body back. Without his body, he can't wreak nearly as much havoc. But in order to get his body back, he takes some of Harry's blood because, and this is a minor spoiler, we've already learned some of it. There's more to it that I won't get into. But Harry was able to defeat Voldemort when he was a baby because of a protection his mother cast by sacrificing herself for him. And so by taking Harry's blood, Voldemort is basically able to circumvent that protection. But what he doesn't see is the repercussions, the things down the line, that by connecting himself with Harry in that way, not gonna be helpful. We also have Pettigrew, who in Prisoner of Azkaban was discovered not to have been dead, and they were gonna take him back to Hogwarts, and things were gonna get solved, people are gonna be acquitted. Pettigrew ends up escaping and returning to Voldemort. However, Harry does save his life in Prisoner of Azkaban, and so he is now indebted to Harry, which then in this book, when Harry winds up in that graveyard, and now they are bringing Voldemort's body back, or creating a body for Voldemort, Wormtail loses his hand, and then he's given a silver hand, and then that debt plus this silver hand come into play later on. We learn about the twin cores. Gosh, there's just so much. I can't even think of them all. I need to have a really large whiteboard and just have all of my points, or not all of my points, but a lot of details scribbled on them, so it doesn't look like I'm looking at it to you, but I'm looking at it and I'm not having to. Anyways, there's just so many points. There's a lot of biggies, but I feel like this book, it just sets up so much. I mean, we also have Fleur, who in a later book becomes engaged and married to Bill, who is Ron's brother, and then, you know, Victor kind of makes an appearance, but you know, there's just a lot of characters, a lot of events, a lot of stuff set up in this book that I think without it, the others would not have been as successful. And I just really enjoy all the subplots, because this one, again, the misdirection, because the whole book is like predicated on the idea, the assumption that Harry is in danger because somebody put his name in the Goblet of Fire. Ergo, obviously, somebody wants him dead. But Harry keeps surviving, and he's like, nobody's even tried to hurt me. Well, except for the fact they put your name in the Goblet of Fire. Yeah, this whole book, we know there's a problem, we know Voldemort is after something, but there's no active attack on Harry. There are other outside problems, but Harry himself, he's sitting pretty, you know what I'm saying? And then we get to the end, and we realize, spoiler, Moody is not Moody. Moody is the fake Moody. He is Barty Crouch Jr. Even there are so many explanations given as to why the possible is impossible. Why it couldn't be what we think it is, because it must be something else. I think it's fantastic how everything makes so much sense, But if you reread the book, you can see how it all ties together, how it's all just misdirection. One other thing that makes me love this book so much is something that I've sort of been complaining about, is that there's just not a whole lot of magic in the other books. We get baby magic, and we do see professors doing legit big magic, but we don't see the spells. We just kind of see the product. And in this one, we get to see so much more. Harry uses gillyweed to swim into the lake and spend an hour in the lake, which, here's a question for you. None of the champions are able to make it out of the lake within the allotted time limit. So who said that it had to be an hour? Did nobody test this to see if it's actually feasible to get to whatever point in the lake the champions have to get to, free their hostage, and then come back? Which reminds me of another question. So if you've read the book, you know the song says that the mermaids are going to take something precious of these people, something that they're going to miss dearly. And so Harry, they take Ron. Victor Crumb, they take Hermione. Fleur Delacour, they take her sister. And then Cedric Diggory, they take Cho Chang. Who, not my favorite character. I liked her at first, but after further readings, I think she's kind of pointless, like kind of vapid. There's not a whole lot behind the scenes, but there's a lot right here. Anyways, so am I the only one who has noticed that Fleur is the only champion who would miss a family member over anybody else? Victor has just met Hermione. Cedric Diggory, he might have had a crush on Cho Chang for quite some time, but really, that's the thing he's gonna miss most. Harry, I understand, because he has no family to speak of. I guess they could have taken it serious, but in retrospect, I find it weird that none of them would miss family, except for Fleur. So, whatever. Back to the magic. We see him learning the summoning spell with the first task. We see him learning spells so that he can get through the maze. We see a bit more polyjuice potion. We see a bit of elfish magic with Winky. We don't actually see this, but we are told by Barty Crouch Jr. how he transfigured his father into a bone. He killed him. We get a lot about memory charms. And there's just so much more magic in this book that, for me, it's starting to fulfill requirements of a book set within a school of witchcraft and wizardry. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Let's talk about characters, and I'm gonna start on a very minor Hagrid rant because I've probably ranted enough for all of us. We continue to see his ineptitude as a teacher, and I just don't get it. Do they not have lesson plans? Do they not have standards that they have to meet? Because these kids have to take tests in order to get out of Hogwarts. Yet, Hagrid doesn't introduce them to any creatures that are going to be on their test. Although we do see it because, and here's another little annoyance of mine, I've talked about what a crybaby he is. Part of me totally get why he's upset. I think I'm a little callous now after a couple of reads. It is revealed that he is part giant, and as we know, there's a lot of discrimination and prejudice against giants, and so this is not something he is happy people know because he is getting really hateful letters. He cries himself to sleep. He locks himself in his cabin. He won't talk to anybody. So in this interim, there is a substitute teacher who actually does a good job teaching. And I find myself wishing, because through this read, Hagrid is the one that I'm annoyed with the most. And so I'm like, yes, please, let's keep Professor Grubbly Plank. She teaches them stuff that once he comes back, he keeps up with. So obviously, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about, yet he continues just to be a terrible teacher. And I'm like, Hagrid, I want to like you, but right now it's not happening. Let's talk about Fred and George because I think they are hilarious. They just get funnier and funnier, which makes something about the 7th book that much harder to swallow. But I just love when there's the Yule Ball, right? So Ron and Harry, clueless about girls, don't know how to get dates, and they're like, so Fred and George, what are you doing for dates? And I think it's Fred is like, oh, give me a minute. Yells across the, actually, I don't know. Yeah, he does. Sorry, sometimes I mix up movie and book. Yells across the room to get a date, and he's like, there you go, guys, and then he just keeps going. Or the fact that they had this joke shop that they want to start, and then another character swindles them out of their money, and so the entire book, they're plotting to get their money back. They're plotting about blackmail, and I just think they're just so funny. I think they really got to shine in this book. They get to shine even more in the next book, although that's not my favorite book, but that is a great part of the book. After Fred and George, I want to talk about Rita Skeeter. I call her Rita Skeeter, even though her name is Rita Skeeter. I think it's because when I listen to the audiobook, that is how the British pronounce their ERs, is more of an and so it's just stuck in my head. But Rita Skeeter, she's one of those characters who, she's kind of like Trelawney in that you love to hate her, except you just hate her. She's a terrible person. You love to hate her, but you really just hate her because she's such a hateful character. I love how ruthless she is. She is so unapologetic. But now I want to get into some of my questions. And the first revolves around Barty Crouch Jr., who at the end of the book is revealed to be an imposter. He has been impersonating Mad-Eye Moody this whole time. Of course, he confesses everything to a select group of people. Later down the line, Fudge comes to Hogwarts, brings a Dementor, and the Dementor sucks out Crouch's soul. And now there's this huge to-do over the fact that they no longer have this witness. To a point, yeah, it's a problem because he can't answer questions that he's not already given answers to. But earlier in the book, we were introduced to the Pensieve, which, again, one of those lovely play on words that I just want to shake Rowling's hand for, because pensive or pensieve, depending on how you want to pronounce it, pensive is thoughtful. The pensieve, well, a sieve is something that you strain something through, and it's also where they put thoughts and memories. So you are very pensive with a pensieve, and it strains out all of the myriad of thoughts in your brain. Love it, love it, love it. But we've been introduced to this pensieve. So can't whoever they is, like if this goes to trial or wherever this might end up, can't they take Barty Crouch Jr.'s thoughts from his head, even though he no longer has a soul, to get answers? Or couldn't they, one, put this select group of people that he admitted everything to under truth serum, or take their memories? We see in Half-Blood Prince that you can attempt to tamper with a memory, but I just don't understand how this is such a big deal when the truth is accessible. Maybe in the greater world of Harry Potter there is more to it that I just don't see, that I don't understand. But I have never gotten why it's such a big deal that Crouch no longer has a soul, because it doesn't affect his brain. Ergo, it doesn't affect his memories. So can't you still get your information? And then this reminds me, with the Dementor, does a Dementor, sorry, I keep pronouncing that funny too. Does a Dementor need permission to suck out a soul? Or was it before the Dementor and Fudge entered the castle, Fudge was like, just attack him as soon as you see him? Or was it just a situation where the Dementor was like, all right, I'm going after it? I understand in Prisoner of Azkaban, where they had been hunting Sirius Black. So, of course, the first time they see him, they're going to try to take his soul out. nobody knew anything about Barty Crouch. I don't know what kind of information Fudge was given as to why he needed to bring a Dementor with him, why he felt that was the safest course of action, but what was it that caused this Dementor to just behave that way? I don't understand. Ron. I've mentioned that in the past he has been the character that I was annoyed with. And once we get to this book, in past books, we have seen moments where Ron is not at his finest, where he kind of shows his true colors. We get to see how cruel he can be. Golly, in this book. So the thing with Ron is he definitely lives in his siblings' shadows. So I can see him having a Napoleon complex where he is the low man on the totem pole, but he wants to shine. And then he becomes best friends with Harry Potter, of all people. And so I can see how he would be jealous when Harry ends up coming out as a champion. But holy cow, like, why is Harry friends with him? On the whole, I do like Ron. I think he's a great comic relief, but on a human level, he's not that nice of a guy. And I personally would be shot at him after like book 3. I've had enough of you, Ron. You cause a lot of drama. And so I feel like I'm not convinced enough about Ron to now love him. I mean, I do. I just keep wishing he'll change, and he never does because he can't. But, ooh, he's a nasty piece of work in this book, although not as nasty as the way he treats, I mean, well, because he does. He's nasty towards Harry, and then he's nasty towards Hermione, and this reminds me, he's kind of nasty towards Victor because he's jealous of whatever's going on between Victor and Hermione. So then, at the end of this book, he finally overcomes his antipathy towards Victor enough to ask him for an autograph. So we're assuming that all is well. And then we get to the Deathly Hallows, where Victor is invited to Fleur and Bill's wedding, and all of a sudden he hates Victor again. And I get it, he's threatened because Victor and Hermione had whatever going on, but I'm like, I thought we'd settled that issue, Ron. Yeah, so Ron, he really starts to become problematic in this book, and I would not continue to put up with him. I just wouldn't. I'd be like, Ron, you need to grow up, all right? Speaking of the end of the book, here's a minor spoiler for Order of the Phoenix. So if you haven't read that book, pause, fast forward, don't listen, sing, do something. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry arrives at school, he can all of a sudden see these horse-like creatures that pull the carriages, and he's like, where did these horse-like creatures come from? Of course, Hagrid is not there to answer his question, so we go through a majority of the book without having any answer to this question. Eventually, we learn that these creatures are called Thestrals. They have always pulled the carriages, but Harry can only see them now because he has witnessed death, which was the death of Cedric in the Goblet of Fire. So actually, my 2 questions. The first question is, at the end of this book, why does he not see the Thestrals when they take the students back? When they take the students back to the Hogwarts Express? And 2 is, what was my other question? Oh, yes. Psh. Did Harry not witness his mother dying in front of his eyes when Voldemort attacked when he was a baby? So why could he not see the Thestrals the entire time if he had witnessed death as an infant? Question. Food for thought. All right, moving on. Here's a minor thing. We all know Hermione is characterized by her bushy hair. And then for the Yule Ball, she applies copious amounts of some kind of special product to make it sleek and shiny. Well, what we've already seen is that wizards can change their appearance with magic, either by transfiguration, which they've obviously not learned yet, Or what had happened with Hermione was a spell gone bad, caused her teeth to elongate. She goes to see the nurse shrinks them until Hermione says, that's good. So she's already fixed her teeth. Why doesn't she permanently fix her hair? Why does she go back to having bushy hair because she doesn't feel like using that special product anymore? Or same with Harry. Like, why does he continue to wear glasses if he could fix it with magic? I mean, I think, obviously, these are defining traits for the characters, but to me, it doesn't make sense. You don't have to use all of that hair gel. All you need is your wand and the right spell, and you're Hermione Granger. Obviously, you know what that spell is. Another question I have, which is probably self-explanatory, but I'm going to pose it anyways. When Harry and company go meet Sirius in the cave, and we are given basically explanation behind the whereabouts or who Barty Crouch Jr., all that is, he gives us information from the time when he was in Azkaban. So it's sort of like with the Chamber of Secrets, where when Harry goes back in the diary and we get to see what's going on with the headmaster, even though Tom Riddle, whose diary and memory it is not in that room, it's kind of like that, where how does Sirius have this information? He wasn't well acquainted with the Crouches, and a lot happened while he was in Azkaban. So was it a matter of he learned these things in the year since he had been on the lam? Or is it just Rowling not realizing that Sirius could never know this information? I mean, it's not like the Dementors were chatting over donuts in front of his cell. How does he know what happened to Barty Crouch Jr. at his trial? How does he know the rise and fall of Barty Crouch Sr.? How does he know about Karkaroff's trial? Like, how does he know all these things when he was in jail? And this reminds me, okay, so this is quite possibly my biggest question. And some of it probably has to do with the narration because it's so well done and so convincing. When Harry goes into the Pensieve and he sees Dumbledore's memories of the trials after Voldemort's fall, and we see Barty Crouch Jr. brought in with the Lestranges and put on trial. My question is, who here thinks he was in league with the Death Eaters and Voldemort, or who here thinks that wrong place, wrong time? If you listen to these audiobooks, he sounds completely innocent, so desperate. I had no clue what was going on. Please save me from this, like, not my fault. And so what I'm concluding, so I put a lot of thought into this because I have no life, is that because he was like, I don't know, 17, 18, I think he'd already done his NEWTs, so that means he's graduated Hogwarts. So I think he's probably 18 because they graduate at 17. My thought is he somehow got caught up in this. Totally innocent, not a Voldemort supporter. However, when he went to Azkaban, because he does not have a good relationship with his dad, then his dad sentences him to Azkaban, he becomes so angry and so bitter that he's like, you know what, maybe Voldemort's side is the right side, and so that is how he gets in league with the Death Eaters, and that is how he becomes Voldemort's inside man, and all that good stuff. So that is my personal thought, but I want to pose the question to you. What do you think is the truth behind Barty Crouch Jr.'s conviction and involvement? Love to hear your answers. I thought I had more, but apparently I don't. And it's getting really late, and I'm sure you guys are all ready for this to be over because we still have 2 more reviews to do this week. So I will let you go, and I will see you tomorrow. I'm not going to sing this time as much as I know you want me to, but I will say, Auf Wiedersehen!